giving ozone treatments for cancer. And this person was not a doctor, and they spent a lot of time talking about all the terrible things he did. And there happened to be hundreds and thousands of qualified physicians who are licensed. One of them even was nominated for a Nobel Prize in Medicine, who they could have interviewed, and they decided not to do that. And I remember confronting NBC News about this, and they didn't even reply.
Ozone or oxygen therapy. Many people say that it is an effective treatment for cancer and AIDS. Dr. Harvey Waxman is a malpractice attorney as well as a neurosurgeon. Some combination, huh?
Yes.
A hoax, right, Harvey?
Absolutely. Unquestionably a hoax.
There's Adam right here. He says his T cell count's 1,000.
Well, it's wonderful. I'm happy for him. I'm absolutely happy for him, and I really am. However, testimonials are no different than snake oil salesmen who had people who threw away or faith healers.
And you know...
First, though, a tragic story of cancer, ozone, and money.
Ozone therapy is controversial. The stories that it works are anecdotal.
Rare media coverage on the subject has profiled con men and ignored the science. Ozone has also been used as an example of health fraud by FDA officials.
Hello, my name is Ken Thiefall. I'm a scientist and clinical researcher.
Despite his white coat, this man is no doctor, and in 1999 was sentenced to prison for making false claims and selling ozone equipment.
A doctor I know of in Mississippi recently cured 248 cases of AIDS simply with the use of ozone.
Those are the classic snake oil salesmen we've heard so much about today. Their actions are moral obscenities of the worst type. And this product, Mr. Chairman, is the notorious ozone generator that you've heard so much about today. This is the tube by which the individual purports to be able to, excuse me, the wrong tube, but you get the idea, to put ozone into their rectum or their vagina, despite the fact that there is no medical evidence to support the efficacy of ozone.
No published studies have ever shown ozone can cure AIDS, and no peer-reviewed doctor has claimed it. But why has this FDA official denied any medical benefit for ozone whatsoever?
Despite the fact that there is no medical evidence to support the efficacy of ozone.
Yeah, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So what's new about that? How many people out there are going to be shocked to find out that their politicians, that the people in high office don't know what they're talking about?
In 2007, the FDA website continues to list ozone as having no medical benefit. The resulting bias has profoundly affected the public's perception of ozone and sent a chill through the research community. Despite a sometimes hostile environment, some limited research has been conducted in the United States, notably with HIV.
We worked on the AIDS virus to try and see how quickly we could inactivate this and at the same time compare it to what effect that had on a healthy white blood cell. And we found that we could produce an enormous inactivation of the virus, reducing it from 1 million virions down to no viruses at all at, say, 4 micrograms of ozone. And twice that dose had no adverse effect on the healthy white blood cell. During that time from 0 to 8 micrograms, that was double the dose that was adversely affecting the virus, you are actually stimulating the white blood cell to be more effective.
Other researchers found similar results. The Canadian Department of National Defence investigated ozone's potential to sterilize blood.
Very, very profound demonstration of the potential as an antiviral agent here. And of course, we're dealing not with concentrations that are toxic to the human, but in fact concentrations of ozone that have been used in Germany in clinics for the last 30 years.
The next step was an animal study. So in 1993, researchers injected plasma contaminated with the simian version of HIV into healthy monkeys. All monkeys injected with contaminated plasma died within 14 days, except those receiving contaminated plasma which had been treated with ozone. They remained 100% uninfected and healthy. Some limited human research followed.
Inadvertently, we discovered that this particular type of therapy has an incredible effect in terms of managing pain. I mean, it has a very potent analgesic effect. And then secondly, we were able to discover that the blood that's ozonized actually triggers off the production of interleukin-2, one of the immune regulators. And definitely, there is no evidence of toxicity. I keep coming back to the analgesic issue because it's profound. You have to experience it for yourself. And once you've done that, then you become the zealot, you know. I mean, that's why there are casualties in the war of science, that you become so convinced that something is right that you're prepared to accept all of the consequences. And some of those consequences can mean the termination of a career. In some cases, you become an outcast to the establishment. So here we were sitting on a very simplistic technology that had promise of literally blowing the lid off of North American medicine, or North American pharmaceutics anyways.
But funding priorities changed, and the research ended. 10 years later, Mike Shannon explains why.
There was a fairly significant underestimation of what the costs, the complexity, and the timelines were for the development of something like ozone therapy within a North American regulatory framework. Sadly, at least to a certain extent, I think the ball was dropped. Not by the Canadian government, by the way, because as I said earlier, it's not the Canadian government's responsibility to develop these types of technologies.
The Canadian studies used equipment from two companies. Both struggled for many years to obtain approval to market their equipment. One company, now called Vasogen, uses an expensive, complicated, and patented method that combines ozone with heat and ultraviolet light to treat tiny samples of blood. In February 2004, Vasogen received European approval to treat vascular conditions. But nowhere in the company website or brochure is the word ozone ever used. They declined a request for an interview. The other supplier was a tiny American startup called Medizone International, created almost 20 years ago by Terence McGrath in New York.
We filed with the Food and Drug Administration for the sale of the drug produced by the equipment and its use in the treatment of AIDS. The FDA required that we carried out research to demonstrate non-toxicity and likely efficacy, and that we've done.
Medizone conducted lab and animal studies, and their application for human trials also referenced the millions of people treated in Europe, but that information was dismissed as anecdotal. The FDA wanted more animal studies, but by the early 1990s, Medizone had run out of money. Desperate for research dollars, Medizone then applied to the U.S. government's National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute to test ozone's potential to sterilize blood. They presented the Canadian monkey study, as well as research conducted by a respected co-discoverer of the HIV virus.
We were able to sterilize HIV and HTLV very effectively in an in vitro setting in human plasma without destroying human factor VIII. Our hope was that we could then pursue this strategy and see, could we use ozone as a way to make human plasma products safer? Would this be a strategy that we could exploit, not just for HIV, but for any potential infectious agent, even those that we haven't discovered yet, and that the ozone might be a cost-effective, thorough way of eliminating infectious agents from plasma products.
Government reviewers could find no fault with Medizone's science, but their application was still rejected for reasons other than scientific. Although not on the review committee, one NIH official did agree to comment.
Ozone, I think, has some potential toxicity to tissues, and of course many things that kill viruses will also kill blood cells. So virtually all of it has a degree of subjectivity, although there are some pretty standard rules of research. It's flawed, people are flawed, but I don't know that there's a better way than the overall peer review, the way the NIH has conducted it for years.
Who is to prove this thing if it isn't the NIH? There's enough material from Europe to at least consider the examination of it, to go ahead and look at it. It's been around since the turn of the century.
The U.S. National Institutes of Health is the largest medical research group in the world. Their 2004 budget is $27 billion, which supports research in more than 2,000 laboratories.
The role of the NIH is to ask and answer and ameliorate the public health problems of a nation.
Doctors and AIDS patients presented scientific and clinical evidence to Tony Fauci, Director of Viral Research at the NIH.
There have been no data that indicate in an organized, reliable clinical trial that ozone has any positive effect. There are anecdotal reports of people say that I did ozone enemas or injected ozone intravenously and my CD4 count bounced way up. But when you look at it in an organized way, there doesn't seem to be any indication that's good. That doesn't mean that any given treatment might not have some potential benefit, but claims of efficacy are not backed up by solid scientific data.
I understand until something is approved, it has to go through rigorous medical study. But they won't even look at this. Now, come on, I mean, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. And as people are dropping dead in the years to come of AIDS, eventually someone is going to say, well, how come these people like Mr. Steven here, who are using the ozone, aren't getting sick and progressing?
What benefit does ozone really offer for people with AIDS? More research is clearly needed. But without the support of a large drug company or the government, who will do the studies? Meanwhile, just down the road from the U.S. Congress at the National Library of Medicine, the database continues to grow. By 2007, PubMed contained 194 references to ozone therapy from major peer-reviewed medical journals around the world. More than 95% of them report improvements and benefits for AIDS, tuberculosis, hepatitis, reduction of infection and pain, and a reduction in mortality. Still, the treatment is largely unknown to American researchers. Some have called it a conspiracy of ignorance.
I believe, and what I said today, need to concentrate on continued basic research and understanding the biological processes involved in virus infection and in pathogenesis, the mechanisms of how the virus produces disease, with our eye on trying to develop what we have to call more natural or biological means of treatment. Because ultimately we would believe or think or propose that these will be less toxic.
Dr. Gallo, what about ozone therapy?
I don't know anything about it. Oh, sorry. I don't know anything about it.
Shunned by the mainstream, ozone has been pushed to the edges of medicine. Grassroots use has been spurred by books like Ed McCabe's, which have reportedly sold 250,000 copies.
I will constantly run into doctors saying, well, you know, I've got an ozone machine, but don't tell anybody. I'm doing ozone infusions, don't tell anybody. Or, well, if you're really sure about the person, tell them they can come see me, that sort of thing. Don't print me in the book, don't put me in the book.
It's not illegal. However, you can get into trouble with your licensing boards. The licensing boards are required to make sure that the doctors they have licensed are not subjecting their patients to fraudulent or dangerous therapies. And some of the licensing boards have determined that ozone is fraudulent or dangerous.
Naturopathic associations now certify their members to use ozone, and several states and provinces have passed legislation allowing doctors to use unorthodox treatments. And a growing number of medical doctors also offer it, sometimes at risk to their license. One maverick doctor who lost his license for 5 days over ozone was the famous late diet guru Robert Atkins.
Well, I had an ozone generator, and we used it on all our AIDS patients. We used it on just about all our cancer patients, and we used it on the yeast patients, which really was the largest group. We found that our cancer protocol, which included ozone, was effective and was keeping people with so-called terminal cancer alive and without ever having to require pain medicine, without losing weight, without any sign of deterioration, because it has been very useful, extremely safe, a wide spectrum of activity, can destroy tumor, can actually allow for shrinkage of tumor without destroying the immune system, sort of enhances the immune system while it's doing its benefit against the tumor. This is true in AIDS. The FDA saw to it that our manufacturer had to take away the business end of the machine. And then when we lost our ozone machine, the patients began to go downhill. To me, there was nothing wrong with ozone. I don't think the FDA ever showed any evidence that ozone was either used improperly or that it even had a risk. It's just that the FDA wanted their jurisdiction.
What do you do when you've got nowhere else to go? You're going to try and find out if there are regulations to restrict you? I think not. You're looking for, it's not as if we're out breaking the criminal law. We're looking for a way to get our health back, and I don't think anyone can condemn that. So for me, it was a very important decision to get an ozone machine, and I became involved in a car chase where the bad guy tried to avoid police and crashed his vehicle into a body of water. As a result of that, I entered into the body of water to try and extricate the driver from his vehicle, and during the course of that time became exposed to a substance that's believed to be either chemical or viral, bacterial. I became very sick. I was off work for 3 years. One of the doctor's reports that stated that everything that could have been done for me in the hospital system had been done, and that basically it was a case of going home, and if I got better, then that was a plus, and if I didn't get better, then, well, we've tried everything we can for you. Now, I'm just a regular individual. I like to go to ball games, drink a beer. The whole illness process changed my life. And as a result, I had to start looking, researching for myself, ways in which to get back to normal health. So I pursued, among other things, the idea of ozone treatments. And it wasn't something that you could get here in Canada. Within hours of having the first treatment, I started to feel a sense of wellness. And I started to feel my ill health turn around. It was a very long, slow process. But the only intervening factor at the time of the change in my health was the ozone treatments. I certainly, for one, am very, very grateful. It's brought my life back. And for those people that think it's quackery or madcap medicine, or wait till you're sick and allopathic medicine, regular medicine has done everything it can for you and you've got nothing left, maybe then you might want to consider trying ozone.
And about 6 years ago, I became severely ill. I had fever for a year and severe arthritis. And eventually I was told that the only treatment given would be steroids, and that also possibly may not help. So really it was oxygen ozone therapy that saved my life, you could say. When I returned to England from Germany, I resolved to introduce this treatment in England. I've been using this now for 5 years. It's the main treatment in the center. I do 4,000 to 5,000 ozones every year. So it's my major work, really. And I see a variety of, or people with variety of illnesses, ranging from influenza to cancer and HIV.
Despite a growing number of ozone therapists, desperate patients continue to seek treatment outside their own country. Sarah Butson has suffered from hepatitis C for 20 years. She chose a small clinic in Tijuana, Mexico for treatment.
I have a background in biochemistry and genetics at a master's level. My initial pre-test or pre-treatment viral count was close to 2 million. At the end of treatment, after 30 days, my viral load had gone down to 12,000. I had never felt such health. I don't even know if I'd felt that healthy any time previously in my life either.
So if you want to look at hepatitis, for example, I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. Optimistic with a disease that otherwise is still a challenge to modern medicine. And if you add to the equation the fact that not only do we not have treatments that are truly efficacious, but we don't have treatments that are affordable either. And we have increasing insights into a disease like that the mortality rate and the morbidity is enormous. That's why I'm here, is the fact that even if only 10% of what's being said out there is correct, that's enough for me. The healthcare system right now is in serious trouble.
I think that a lot of people are dying needlessly because of government policies. And that's one reason why a lot of people are doing self-treatment. That's why they're going to Germany and going to Cuba and going to Mexico, because they can't get treatment for their diseases here in the United States.
I think it's terrible. I think it's terrible. Why do American citizens have to resort to travel to Mexico, to Germany, to the Bahamas, and spend their life savings to try to get a treatment? My T cells were down to like 30. I was having fatigue, loss of appetite, intermittent fevers and night sweats. And I turned to conventional medicine, AZT, prophylactics for pneumocystis pneumonia, CMV. I was prophylacting on about 5 medications, and I had a very, very quick deterioration. And my body repelled them, I stopped. And since I have began the ozone therapy, I feel phenomenal. I'm as strong as an ox. But what is my alternative? AZT, DDI, DDC, nucleoside analogs that I have been on. And I wanted to jump out of a window. I had such severe headaches all the time, and I was emaciating because I couldn't eat. I would want to throw up by just smelling food. And these were all caused by the medications which the conventional medical establishment is using to supposedly combat this disease. I don't recommend that other people try and administer through themselves. I would, emphatically recommend that you do this under the care of a physician, obviously. This is not something that I enjoy doing. I felt I was near death, and this is something that I have resorted to save my life. I'm just appalled that this treatment is unavailable to me. I firmly believe, that this is a treatment with much benefit. It certainly also needs to be studied on a scientific level. Dosage is, monitored, and, double-blind studies, and, I definitely support all that, but I was dying then. I need it now, not 10 years down the line.
Basically, I use ozone to detoxify liver. If I'm preparing for a film, I do IV drips, and I'll also do maybe 2 or 3 days later an ozone injection. Also, I have a herpes condition that usually breaks out from nervous tension. It'll break out in cold sores. I can totally avoid that with ozone insufflation.
There's approximately 50 million people in the world with HIV, and there's 300 million with hepatitis C and another 200 million with hepatitis B. We all need to recognize that the world is under a viral affront right now like it has never experienced before, and it's getting worse. And we need inexpensive solutions. And Medizone is an inexpensive, very effective, non-toxic solution.
Ozone has no side effects. It won't hurt anybody.